The noise and the sound of footsteps echoed on the streets of New York. The police were chasing a dangerous criminal. Finally, after much effort and determination, the police captured Crowley 2 Gun, a notorious serial killer, at an unexpected place, his lover's house on West End Avenue. 150 policemen and secret agents surrounded the tallest building where he was hiding. They pierced the roof, sprayed smoke, and set up machine guns at the windows of the surrounding buildings. The harsh sound of machine guns and pistols rang out continuously for over an hour. Inside the room on the top floor, Crowley hid behind thickly padded armchairs, fiercely resisting the police forces with bursts of automatic fire. But in the end, this sharpshooting criminal had to surrender. New York Police Commissioner E.P. Mulrooney emphasized that Crowley 2 Gun was one of the most dangerous and ruthless criminals in the history of crime in this most populous American city. A noteworthy point about Crowley was, for the smallest reason, or even for no reason at all, or simply for fun, he could point a gun at someone and pull the trigger. However, that was the police's perspective. This cold-blooded criminal thought otherwise. While the police outside tried every way to capture him, Crowley was writing a letter inside the room. The letter was stained with red blood. And this is what Crowley wrote: "Under this coat is a weary but tender heart, a heart that has never harmed anyone." Reading these lines, one might feel moved, but the truth was the opposite of what he wrote. Just a few hours earlier, Crowley had shot a traffic policeman when he was stopped for a license check. When the officer fell, Crowley jumped out of the car, grabbed the victim's gun, and coldly fired another shot into the officer's trembling, dying body. Crowley was sentenced to death. On the electric chair at Sing Sing prison, he justified, "Is this the penalty I must pay for killing people? No. This is the penalty I must pay for protecting myself." It's strange that such an obvious villain refused to acknowledge his own crimes. I corresponded with Louis Laws, the warden of Sing Sing prison, where the most dangerous criminals in New York are held. Louis Laws confided, "Very few prisoners in Sing Sing view themselves as bad people. They think they are just as normal as you and me. They can tell you why they cracked a safe or pulled the trigger quickly. Most of them try to offer false justifications for their unlawful and unethical actions. They firmly believe there's no reason for them to be imprisoned." If Al Capone, 2 Gun, and the gangsters never admitted their heinous crimes, can ordinary people easily recognize their everyday mistakes? John Wanamaker, the founder of the retail store chain bearing his name, admitted, 30 years ago, "I realized that criticizing others is foolish. I faced many unbearable troubles before understanding an obvious truth that God gave each person a unique trait, and no one is alike. Therefore, I cannot expect everyone to behave the same way and self-criticize when they do something wrong." Indeed, Wanamaker wisely learned that lesson early, while it took me a third of a century to begin understanding that 99% of us never criticize ourselves for anything, no matter how wrong we might be. Criticism is futile, it only evokes defense and justification. Criticism can even become dangerous as it touches on human pride, hurting their sense of importance, and ultimately, it only generates anger and resentment. Criticism leads to denial of responsibility and fosters frustration and discouragement while the mistake remains unresolved. B.F. Skinner, the famous psychologist, demonstrated through experiments that an animal rewarded for good behavior learns quicker and retains better than an animal punished for bad behavior. Recent studies show this is true for humans as well. Renowned psychologist Hans Selye noted, "The fear of being condemned is as great as the desire to be praised." George B. Johnston in Enid, Oklahoma, was in charge of worker safety in a design company. A significant responsibility of his was ensuring workers wore safety helmets at construction sites. He recounted that whenever he saw workers without helmets, he used his authority to force them to comply. They reluctantly accepted. But as soon as he turned his back, they took off their helmets. After training with Dale Carnegie, he decided to try a different approach. When he saw a few workers without helmets, he asked if the helmets didn't fit or if there was any problem. Then he reminded them to wear helmets while working to avoid injury or accidents. As a result, the number of workers wearing helmets increased without any resistance or displeasure. Throughout history, one can easily find countless failures due to human nature's tendency to criticize. Human nature is such that those who commit wrongs and criticize others never self-criticize. Criticism, like a homing pigeon, always returns to its origin. A dangerous thing is that those we criticize and condemn will surely find reasons to defend themselves and counter-criticize us. On the morning of April 15, 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth in a room at a modest boarding house across the street from Ford's Theater. Looking at Lincoln with deep respect and profound sorrow, Secretary of War Stanton exclaimed, "Now he belongs to the ages." What secret led to Lincoln's success as a leader? In my opinion, it was his way of treating people that earned him their special affection and complete trust. However, this character trait wasn't innate. Lincoln developed it through experience and self-discipline. Few people know that Lincoln, during his time in the Pigeon Creek Valley, Indiana, was not only a harsh critic but also enjoyed writing letters and poems mocking others, then scattering them for people to read. Few are aware that the accomplished lawyer Lincoln in Springfield, Illinois, often publicly criticized his opponents through articles in local magazines. This arrogance and recklessness might have continued if not for one fateful day. One autumn day in 1842, the young, overconfident Lincoln ridiculed an arrogant politician named James Shields with an anonymous article in the Springfield Journal. The entire town laughed at James. Enraged, James set out to find the author, challenging Lincoln to a duel for his honor. Lincoln, who disliked dueling and had fought against the practice, could not avoid the challenge without losing his own honor. Allowed to choose the weapon, Lincoln, who had long arms, selected cavalry broadswords and quickly learned fencing from a friend who had graduated from West Point. At the appointed time, he and James met on a sandbar by the Mississippi River. Fortunately, their seconds intervened, cooling the heated tempers and preventing the deadly duel. Facing the brink of life and death, Lincoln realized the horror of such confrontations. This near-fatal encounter taught him a valuable lesson about dealing with others. From that moment on, Lincoln never wrote a slanderous letter, never mocked anyone, and rarely criticized others for anything. During the American Civil War, Lincoln appointed Generals McClellan, Pope, Burnside, Hooker, and Meade to lead the Army of the Potomac. Each of these generals made significant mistakes, driving Lincoln to despair multiple times. While half the nation fiercely condemned these incompetent generals, Lincoln remained kind-hearted and refrained from criticizing any of them. One of his common sayings was, "We must not criticize others so that we won't be criticized ourselves." When Mrs. Lincoln and his cabinet harshly condemned the Southerners, Lincoln advised, "Don't criticize them. They are just what we would be under similar circumstances." On a few occasions, Lincoln almost criticized others. However, he refrained, even when he had every reason to do so. The Battle of Gettysburg took place during the first 3 days of July 1863. On the night of July 4th, Southern General Lee began to retreat southward under heavy rain. Ahead of him and his defeated army lay the raging, swollen Potomac River. Behind him was a victorious Union army in pursuit. Lee was trapped and seemingly without escape. From his headquarters, Lincoln recognized this as a golden opportunity to capture Lee's entire army and potentially end the war. He ordered General Meade to stop convening war councils and to immediately pursue Lee. Lincoln sent his orders by telegraph and dispatched a special envoy to ensure Meade acted at once. But what did Meade do? He defied Lincoln's orders, convening a war council instead. He hesitated, then telegraphed Lincoln refusing to pursue Lee. The next morning, the river subsided, and Lee's army safely crossed the Potomac. Lincoln was furious. He exclaimed to his son Robert, "My God! What does it mean? We had only to stretch forth our hands and they were ours. Yet everything I say and do seems to make no impression on the army. If I were there, I believe I could have whipped them myself." In extreme disappointment and anger, Lincoln wrote a letter to Meade. This period was marked by Lincoln's intense frustration and difficulty in changing his views. Therefore, the letter he wrote to Meade in 1863 contained the harshest criticism. "My dear General, I do not believe you appreciate the magnitude of the misfortune involved in Lee's escape. He was within our easy grasp, and to have closed upon him would, in connection with our other late successes, have ended the war. As it is, the war will be prolonged indefinitely. If you could not safely attack Lee last Monday, how can you possibly do so south of the river with the growing forces he now has? It would be unreasonable to expect, and I do not expect, that you can now effect much. Your golden opportunity is gone, and I am distressed immeasurably because of it. Yours very truly. Lincoln. What do you think Meade did upon reading this letter? Meade did nothing because he never saw the letter. Lincoln never sent it. The letter was found among his papers after his death. I suspect, this is just my guess, that after writing the letter, Lincoln looked out of the window and gently said to himself, "Wait a minute. Maybe I shouldn't be so hasty. It's easy enough for me to sit here in the quiet of the White House and order Meade to attack. But if I had been at Gettysburg last week and seen as much blood as Meade has seen, and heard the cries of the wounded and dying as he did, I might not have been so anxious to attack either. If I had Meade's timid temperament, perhaps I would have done just what he has done. Anyhow, it's water under the bridge now. If I send this letter, it will relieve my feelings, but it will make Meade try to justify himself. It will make him resentful and might even impair his usefulness as a commander. Possibly he might resign from the army." So Lincoln put the letter aside. He had learned a valuable lesson: criticism and harsh words almost always end in resentment and negative outcomes. Theodore Roosevelt recounted that when facing difficult problems, he would lean back in his chair and look at a large portrait of Lincoln hanging above his desk in the White House and ask himself, what would Lincoln do if he were in my shoes? How would he solve this problem? Famed writer Mark Twain once wrote a letter to someone who had infuriated him, stating, "The thing for you is a burial permit. You have only to speak, and I will see that you get it." On another occasion, he wrote to a publisher regarding a proofreader who had changed his spelling and punctuation, "Set the whole thing up exactly as I have written it. And tell the man who did it to give up his job and go to chasing snakes because he doesn't know how to punctuate my book." Writing these letters made Twain feel better. The scathing words allowed him to vent his anger. Fortunately, they caused no harm because Twain's wife discreetly kept them all. None of the letters were ever sent. Is there someone you want to change and help them improve? I fully support this. But why not start with yourself? Changing oneself is more useful and realistic than trying to change others, and the likelihood of success is much higher. Confucius said, "Do not criticize the snow on your neighbor's roof when your own doorstep is unclean." If you want to harbor a grudge against someone for decades or even until your death, give them harsh, critical words, even if you know those criticisms are correct. In reality, people rarely use pure logic to discern right from wrong. Most people act based on emotion, prejudice, and especially their inherent pride. Harsh criticism drove Thomas Hardy, one of England's greatest novelists, to abandon novel writing forever. Extreme criticism pushed English poet Thomas Chatterton to suicide. Benjamin Franklin, once a rude young man, became a skilled diplomat chosen as the American ambassador to France. When asked about his secret to success, he replied, "I will speak ill of no man and speak all the good I know of everybody." Any fool can criticize, complain, and condemn, and most fools do. But it takes self-control and a generous soul to understand and forgive others. Great individuals often demonstrate their greatness through how they treat little people. The following story is a concrete example. Bob Hoover, a famous American test pilot and airshow performer, experienced engine failure shortly after takeoff. He skillfully managed to land the aircraft safely, though it was severely damaged. Upon inspection, Hoover found that the fuel tank of the World War II-era aircraft contained jet fuel instead of gasoline. The mechanic who serviced the plane made a grave mistake, nearly causing a fatal crash. The young mechanic, distraught and on the verge of a breakdown, awaited Hoover's wrath. Instead, Hoover approached him, placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, and said, "I'm sure you'll never make this mistake again. To prove my confidence in you, I want you to service my F-51 tomorrow." Imagine the profound relief and gratitude the mechanic felt. Parents often scold their children. However, before you criticize your child again, read Father Forgets. This essay first appeared in the People's Home Journal. We reprint it here with the author's permission. The Forgotten Father is a short piece written in a moment of genuine emotion, impacting many readers so strongly that it has been requested for reprint every year. Immediately after its first appearance, this famous piece was published in newspapers across America, translated into various languages, widely disseminated in schools, churches, on forums, and broadcast in countless radio and television programs. Interestingly, periodic magazines of high schools and colleges also use this piece. Sometimes a small thing can create miraculous and significant influences. This piece has truly performed a miracle with parents and families. My dear son, listen to your father's words of regret. I sneaked into your room alone when you were immersed in your innocent sleep. Look, one of your hands is placed under your cheek, and your curly hair is wet with sweat clinging to your moist forehead. Just a few minutes ago, while I was sitting in the library reading my article, regret suddenly filled my soul. And I immediately ran to your room to apologize. Oh son, I got angry and scolded you when you wiped your face hastily while changing clothes for school, when you left your dirty shoes lying around, or when you scattered things in the house. I always focused on seeing all your faults. In the morning, I saw you not tidying up after waking up, eating hastily, and taking too much food on your plate. Seeing only faults, when you asked for permission to go out and play, I just frowned and replied curtly with no affection, Make sure you come back soon. In the afternoon, I also got angry with your mistakes. When I saw your socks were torn, I embarrassed you in front of your friends by dragging you home. You really made me very angry because you did not save money, not taking care of the things I had to work hard to earn and save to buy for you. When I was reading the newspaper, you timidly approached and looked at me with innocent eyes, and I shouted, "What do you want?" And my heart was deeply moved when you just silently ran up, wrapped your small arms around my neck with all your love and tenderness, and then quickly ran outside. My dear son. Do you know, the newspaper silently slipped from my hands, and a mixture of fear and sorrow engulfed my heart. What have I done? I turned myself into a father who only focused on finding my child's faults. A father who only looked for the bad to criticize, and this is the reward I gave you as a child? I wanted you to behave like this and that. I wanted you to act like an adult. I measured you with the yardstick of a grown-up, with all my years of life and mature experiences. My beloved son. While I looked at you with those old, weary eyes filled with prejudice and scrutiny, I didn't bother to notice the good, the sincere, and the innocent in your nature. Your little heart is warm and great like the dawn, giving so many warm rays to the vast hills. You innocently ran to kiss me goodnight without any burden, despite my scolding you all day and being harsh with you for unjust reasons. My dear son. I can't wait any longer. I must quickly come to you, kneel beside your small bed, and look at your innocent sleeping face with immense regret. Perhaps you are too young to understand the emotions overflowing in my heart. I promise you, from this very moment, I will return to being a true father who always cherishes your love even in moments of burning anger. I will be your faithful friend, will suffer when you are unhappy, and will laugh with you when you are happy and fortunate. I will bite my lips to not utter angry words whenever the demon of anger rises in my heart. I will remind myself that you are still a little boy. Oh, I seem to have looked at my little child as if looking at a real grown-up. Now, looking at you curled up in the blanket and sleeping soundly on that tiny bed, I realize that you are just an innocent child. Every morning, you still nestle in your mother's loving arms. Your soft hair still lingers on her shoulders, needing the shelter of being loved. Yet I demanded too much from you. I have read this story many times, and each time it brings me the same emotions as the first time. Then I ask myself how many times in my life I have also been unjustly angry with those around me. Let's empathize and understand others instead of blaming them. Put yourself in their position to understand why they act the way they do. To know all is to forgive all. As Dr. Johnson once said, even God does not judge a man until the end of his days. So why should you and I? The people you meet on the road of life will affect your life. Whether good or bad, they also give you wonderful life experiences. Therefore, do not condemn, criticize, or complain about anyone. Even if someone hurts you, betrays you, or takes advantage of your kindness, please forgive them, because maybe thanks to them, you learn tolerance. Criticizing a person is not difficult. Rising above that judgment to act generously and forgivingly is something to be proud of. Principle 1. Do not criticize, condemn, or complain. Part 1, Chapter 2, The Greatest Secret in Interpersonal Relationships. There's only one most effective way to get someone to do what we want. And always remember that there is no other way. If we grab someone by the hair, put a gun to their head, and shout loudly, "How much wealth do you have? Give it all to me." Puff up and challenge our employees, saying, "If you don't work hard, I will fire you immediately." Look outside, see how many people want to be my employees. Hold a big cane and yell at our son, "You fool. If you keep playing and getting your clothes dirty, I will give you 100 strokes." Let's imagine what will happen in these three scenarios. The common denominator of all three cases is that the people we threaten will comply with what is asked of them. But, more importantly, they will do so with resentment, discomfort, defiance, and indignation. Worse, they might do the opposite. The person with the gun might wrestle the gun away, the employee might work diligently in front of us but deceive behind our backs or find another job with a better boss, and the child might still sneak out to play and then sneak back home to clean up before we notice they didn't listen. Instead of forcing others to comply with our wishes, a simpler way to make others do anything is this: let them do what they want. The renowned psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud said, "Every action of human beings is driven by two motives: the pride of sex and the desire to be important." John Dewey, one of America's deepest philosophers, had a slightly different perspective. The deepest impetus in human nature is the desire to be expressed. So, what do you desire for yourself? What intense demands are burning within you? Most of us desire the following: good health and a peaceful life, foods we enjoy, sound sleep, adequate money and material comforts, a good afterlife, satisfaction in sexual life, healthy and smart children, feeling important. Most of these desires are usually satisfied, except for one thing, which is deep, urgent, and less often satisfied. It is what Freud called the desire to be important, or the desire to express oneself, as Dewey mentioned. Abraham Lincoln wrote, "Everybody likes a compliment," while William James believed that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated. It's not just desire or craving, but craving to be appreciated. Craving describes a persistent desire that is not satisfied. And those who can sincerely satisfy this craving will control the behaviors of others. The desire to feel important is one of the primary differences between humans and other creatures. When I was a boy in rural Missouri, my father raised some amusing Duroc Jersey pigs. We often brought these pigs and other livestock to exhibitions at county fairs and livestock shows across the Midwest. We always led the competitions, with prizes being blue ribbons. My father usually tied these ribbons on a piece of thin white fabric. When friends or visitors came to our house, my father often unfolded the fabric to show off. He held one end, and I held the other, and he detailed with pride to everyone about each prize won. The pigs were indifferent to the prizes they had won. But my father wasn't. These prizes made him feel important. If our ancestors didn't have the burning desire to feel important, there would never be unique civilizations, and our species today wouldn't be any different from other animals. The desire to feel important has driven a poorly educated, impoverished grocery store employee to study old law books he happened to find at the bottom of a bargain bin he bought for 50 cents. Perhaps you've heard of this grocery store employee. His name is Lincoln. And it is this desire to feel important that propelled Charles Dickens to write timeless novels. This desire also motivated Christopher Wren to write his symphonies in stone. And this same desire helped Rockefeller earn millions of dollars, most of which he hardly ever used. When we wear fashionable clothes, use branded items, drive trendy cars, use trendy mobile phones, brag about smart children, we are showing the desire to feel important in front of others. However, this desire also has its downside. Many young people join gangs, engage in criminal activities, use heroin and drugs as if to assert themselves, to be seen by society as supermen. E. P. Mulrooney, a New York City police commissioner, said, "Most young criminals have a very big ego. Their first request after being arrested is to see how newspapers report their stories." Indeed, this is a very human factor. Almost everyone is like that. If the desire to feel important is not considered a human attribute, many people might be surprised to learn that even the greatest, most honored figures in human history are the same. One might be surprised to wonder why great men like George Washington also want to be called His Excellency the President of the United States. One might wonder why an intellectual like Christopher Columbus also wants to be called Admiral of the Ocean Sea and Viceroy of the Indies. And one will be even more surprised to learn that Queen Catherine the Great wouldn't open any letter without the outer address, "To Her Majesty the Supreme Authority." The billionaire philanthropists agreed to sponsor Admiral Byrd's Antarctic expedition in 1928 with the sole condition that their names be given to the mountain ranges there. Victor Hugo desired nothing more than for Paris to be renamed in his honor. Even Shakespeare, dubbed the greatest among the great, sought to magnify his fame by petitioning the royal family for a noble title. Sometimes, people turn themselves into invalids to garner sympathy, attention from others, to feel important. Mrs. McKinley sought significance by requiring her husband, U.S. President William McKinley, to set aside official duties for hours each day to be with her, even to help her sleep. She nurtured her craving for attention by demanding his presence, even during her dental appointments. Once, she made a fuss when he dared leave her alone with the dentist to attend an important meeting with the Secretary of State. Author Mary Roberts Rinehart once told me about a smart, healthy girl who became ill just to feel important. Rinehart recounted, she lay in bed for 10 years, making her old mother struggle up and down 3 flights of stairs to serve her every day. One day, the old mother fell ill and later passed away. In the following weeks, she genuinely fell ill and bedridden. But then she quickly recovered and resumed a healthy, normal life as if she had never been sick. Even madness can be pursued to find the sense of importance that one cannot attain in this mundane world. Many immerse themselves in computer games to become heroic figures. While in real life, they are just ordinary people, lacking status or social standing. A leading neurology professor at a top psychiatric hospital in the U.S. asserts that many patients find in the mad world the sense of becoming important, which they cannot achieve in real life. He told me a story. Recently, I had a female patient experiencing family tragedy. She wanted to be cared for, comforted, loved. She wanted children and social status, but real life crushed all her desires. Her husband didn't love her. He wouldn't even sit and eat with her, making her serve him meals in an attic room. She had no children, no social status. As a result, she became mentally ill. In her imagination, she saw herself divorcing her husband, returning as a free person. Then she thought she had married into an English noble lineage and emphasized being called Mrs. Smith. Moreover, she imagined having a child every night. "Every time I visited," she said, "Doctor, last night I gave birth." Life has dashed all her dreams against the jagged rocks of reality. But in the sun-drenched islands of wild imagination, her dream ship has landed with billowing sails rejoicing in the wind. The doctor affirmed to me, if I could heal her illness just by raising my hand, I wouldn't do it. Living like this makes her much happier. If some crave the feeling of importance to the extent of becoming insane to attain it, imagine what wonders you and I could achieve if we could have it without resorting to the realm of imagination. One of the first people in America to earn over $1 million a year was Charles Schwab, at a time when the U.S. had no personal income tax and someone was considered rich when they earned $50 a week. He was appointed by Andrew Carnegie as the first chairman of the United States Steel Corporation in 1921 when he was only 38. Why did Andrew Carnegie agree to pay $1 million a year, nearly $30,000 a day, to Charles Schwab? Was it because Charles Schwab was a genius? Or did he have more knowledge about steel than others? Not at all. Charles Schwab told me that many who worked for him had more knowledge about steel processing than he did. The reason Schwab was paid so much was that he had the ability to win people's hearts. He shared that his secret was the ability to create enthusiasm in those who work with him, to bring out the best in a person by recognizing, praising, and encouraging them. There's no way to kill a person's dreams and efforts more than through the attitude and criticism of superiors. I never criticize anyone. I believe in motivating people to work. This makes me always eager to praise others and not like to further hurt their mistakes. If I like something, I will always encourage it with all my sincerity, and they respond most enthusiastically. That's what Schwab did. So how did ordinary people behave? They did the exact opposite. If they didn't like something, they scolded the employees. If they did, they said nothing. As an old saying goes, no matter how well you do, not a word of praise. Make a mistake once, remember it forever. Schwab shared, throughout my life, I have never met anyone who does their job well without the support of others. Andrew Carnegie was no exception. And that's one of the reasons behind the extraordinary success of the Steel King. Andrew Carnegie praised those who worked with him both publicly and privately. Even on his tombstone, he praised all those who had ever worked for him. Here lies a man who knew how to gather those better than himself. Sincere appreciation and gratitude are among the first secrets of success for John D. Rockefeller in dealing with people. When his employee Edward Bedford caused $1 million loss in a South American business deal, instead of criticizing, John D. Rockefeller praised Bedford for saving 60% of the money Rockefeller had invested. Rockefeller did this because he knew Edward had tried his best. He said, "That's great. We can't always do as well as that." Among the newspaper clippings I left behind, there is a funny story that I know is not true, but it illustrates a truth. Let me tell you, one day, after a hard day's work, a farmer's wife threw a pile of dry grass in front of the men in her family instead of preparing dinner as usual. When they angrily asked if she was crazy, she replied, "I've been cooking for you for 20 years, and during that time, I've never heard anyone thank me or tell me that you don't know how to eat dry grass." A study a few years ago on why wives leave home showed that the main reason for this situation is lack of recognition and appreciation. And I'm sure if there were a study on why husbands leave home, it would yield similar results. We often think that having our spouse by our side is natural, so we rarely thank them or show appreciation. A student in our class recounted that his wife and another group of women in the church participated in a self-improvement program. She asked him to help by listing 6 things he thought she could change to become a better wife. He told the class, "I was surprised by such a request. Honestly, I could easily list 6 things I wanted her to change. And, of course, she could also list 1,000 things she wanted me to change, but I didn't do that. I said, let me think about it, and I'll answer tomorrow." The next morning, I woke up very early, bought 6 roses for my wife with a card that said, "I can't think of 6 things I want you to change. I love you just the way you are now." That evening, when I came home, my wife greeted me with tears of emotion. Needless to say, I was extremely happy that I didn't criticize her as requested. The following Sunday at church, after my wife reported the results of the assigned task, many women in the class came to me and said, "We've never heard such a polite, courteous, and sweet gesture before." That's when I truly understood the power of appreciation and gratitude. I once tried fasting and went 6 days and nights without eating anything. Actually, it wasn't that difficult. By the end of the 6th day, I wasn't any hungrier than I was at the end of the 2nd day. However, if we let our family or employees fast for 6 days, it would be a big mistake. Yet, we let our beloved family, our diligent and dedicated employees, go without praise for 6 weeks or even 60 years without genuine appreciation. We fail to realize that they are craving our genuine praise, just as much as a hungry person craves a good meal. Alfred Lunt, one of the greatest actors of all time, who played the lead role in the play Reunion in Vienna, said, "What I need most in my life is to nurture a sense of appreciation for myself." We nurture our children's physical well-being, care about our employees' material lives, but often forget to nurture or impart to them the self-appreciation of their own values. We can provide them with delicious food, but often forget to give them sincere praise that they will remember forever, like remembering the most beautiful melodies. Paul Harvey, in one of his radio broadcasts, told a story illustrating how sincere praise and appreciation can change a person's life. Many years ago, a teacher in Detroit asked Stevie Morris to help her find a mouse in the classroom. She praised Stevie's talent, saying that God had given Stevie a keen sense of hearing to compensate for his blindness. She did not expect that this was actually the first time Stevie had been respected by someone, appreciated for his hearing ability, and forgotten his disability. To this day, Stevie admits that the respect he received that day was a turning point in his life. Since being praised and discovering his hearing talent, he has worked hard to develop his abilities until he became one of the greatest pop singers and songwriters of the 1970s, under the legendary name Stevie Wonder. When reading these stories, you might say, "Wow! These are just meaningless flatteries. I've tried this before." But it really doesn't work, especially with sensitive people who hate fake, flattering habits. Of course, flattery rarely works with knowledgeable people who can deeply distinguish between flattery and sincere praise and gratitude. Because flattery is just empty, selfish words, completely insincere, and certainly fails. However, some people crave praise so much that they swallow any praise like a hungry person eating both vegetables and worms. Insincere flattery is like counterfeit money. It will be difficult when we pass it on to someone else. The difference between appreciation and flattery is simple. One is sincere, the other is not. One comes from the heart, the other from the mouth. One is generous, sincere, the other is selfish, purposeful. One is felt, touching, the other is condemned by everyone. Recently, I saw a statue of a Mexican hero, General Alvaro Obregón, at the Chapultepec Castle in Mexico. Under the statue are Obregón's philosophical words: "Don't fear the enemies who attack you, but fear those who flatter you." Exactly. I totally do not encourage flattery. I'm talking about a new way of living. Let me remind you, a new way of living. King George V had a series of 6 maxims written on the walls of his study at Buckingham Palace. One of these maxims reads, "Prevent me from giving and receiving cheap praise." All flattery is cheap praise. I really resonate with a definition that says, flattery is telling someone what he likes to think about himself. When our minds are not preoccupied, we usually spend about 95% of our time thinking about ourselves. Stop thinking about yourself for a moment and start thinking about the good things about those around you. Then, you and I will find that we don't need to resort to flattery anymore. It's just cheap and fake. One of the most forgotten values in daily life is appreciation, gratitude. I don't know why we always forget to praise our children when they bring home a commendation or a report card with good academic achievements for the month. We forget to encourage our children when they first bake a cake or voluntarily clean up their study corner. Nothing makes a child happier than the care and praise of their parents. Whenever I enjoy a delicious meal at a restaurant, I always remind myself to tell the chef that the food is excellent. When I encounter a tired salesperson who still shows kindness to customers, I always remind myself to thank them for their attentive service and enthusiasm. All actors, singers, and speakers around the world feel discouraged if they don't receive any applause or praise from the audience. If this is true for professional performers, it is even more true for those working in offices, shops, factories, in our families, and among our friends. In all relationships between people, let's remember that everyone who cooperates with us is a human being, and they all crave recognition, appreciation, and respect for what they have done. Let's ignite the fire of sincere gratitude for everyone in life. The spread of this fire will bring you timeless values. Criticizing or offending others never wakes them up to become better, so never do it. There is an ancient maxim that I pasted on my mirror to see every day: I only live on this earth once, so if I can do any good or show my gratitude to anyone, I will do it immediately, without delay, because I know I won't live to see a second time, or fear I won't have the opportunity. Philosopher Emerson said, "Every person I meet is something better than me, and I always learn something from them." I hope this is also true for you and me. Let's stop thinking about our achievements, our desires, and try to find out the good things about others. People will greatly appreciate your praise and always have the motivation to do similar good things throughout their lives. Knowing how to praise and thank others sincerely is the magic wand that creates a great sense of kinship and encouragement. It is a joy that everyone is cared for, recognized, and loved. Everyone praised sincerely will naturally correct their faults to become better. The deepest driving force in human nature is the desire to express oneself. American philosopher John Dewey. Principle 2. Sincerely praise and thank others. Part 1, Chapter 3. Whoever does this will have the world. I often go fishing in the summer. I really enjoy eating ice cream and fruits, but fish prefer to eat worms. So, when I go fishing, I don't think about my favorite food but rather about the favorite food of the fish. I don't hook ice cream or fruits onto the fishing hook, but rather a worm or a grasshopper, dangling the bait in front of the fish and saying, "Hey, fish, do you like this?" Human behavior is similar. This is something that Lloyd George, the great Prime Minister of England during World War I, did. When someone asked him how he managed to maintain power while many wartime leaders in other countries were often forgotten, he replied that the only reason he was able to do that was because of one thing: learning how to bait the hook appropriate to each type of fish. It can be said that the only way to influence others is to talk about what they want and guide them on how to achieve it. If you want your teenage son not to smoke, then talk about things he wants to hear, such as the possibility of not being able to find a girlfriend because of bad breath or not being able to win in the upcoming soccer match due to poor health from smoking. There is a scientifically proven fact that even animals want to be treated this way. It is said that one day, the philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson and his son wanted to put a calf into the barn. But they made a common mistake of only thinking about what they wanted. So Emerson and his son, the pusher and the puller, were pushing and pulling the calf. But the calf only did what it wanted, standing still and stubbornly refusing to move. The maid for the Emerson family saw the situation. She didn't know poetry or essays, but she understood the psychology of animals better than the philosopher Emerson. She put her finger into the calf's mouth for it to suck on, like a mother's teat, and then gently pushed it into the barn. Since the day you were born, every action you take is because you want something. Why do you contribute money to charity? Because you want to share and help those who are less fortunate or unhappy than you. And because you genuinely want to do something good, selflessly and altruistically out of love. If the desire for this feeling is not stronger than the desire for having more money, you will never be charitable. Of course, you may contribute because you feel ashamed to refuse, or because an acquaintance asks you to. Whichever way, there is one thing for sure: you contribute because you want to get something. Harriet Overstreet, in his work Influencing Human Behavior, wrote, "All behavior arises from where we fundamentally want to go." The best advice for those who want to persuade others, whether in business, family, school, or politics, is, first, evoke in the person you want to influence a strong desire. Those who can do this will have the world follow them and will never be alone. Andrew Carnegie, a poor man from Scotland who only spent 4 years in school, but early on learned in the school of life the only way to influence the behavior of others. That is, speak in a way that others want to hear. He started working with 2 cents an hour to eventually contribute $365 million to charitable organizations. Carnegie's grandsons, studying at Yale, always thought they were too busy to write home. They paid little attention to their mother's earnest letters, causing their mother to worry sick. Carnegie bet $100 that he could make his 2 grandsons reply immediately without even being asked. He wrote each grandson a letter of inquiry, at the end of which he said he was enclosing a $5 bill for each of them. But he pretended to forget to put the money in the envelope. And as he had predicted, the replies came immediately: "Dear Uncle Andrew." I guess you can guess the rest of the letter on your own. Another example of persuasion is the story of Stan Novak in Cleveland, Ohio. One afternoon, Stan came home from work and found his youngest son, Tim, crying in the living room. The boy didn't want to go to kindergarten the next day. Instead of reacting normally by kicking the kid out of the room and making him promise to go to school, Stan calmly sat down and thought, if I were Tim, why would I be upset about going to kindergarten? It must be because there's nothing fun at school and I'm not allowed to stay home and play. So, afterwards, the couple made a list of all the fun games Tim would participate in at kindergarten, such as finger painting, singing and dancing, playing with new friends. Then, they played these games right in front of the boy. Seeing his older brother, Bob, get involved first, Tim soon joined in. Oh, no! You have to go to kindergarten first to learn how to paint with 10 fingers. With all the enthusiasm, the father read through the entire list of fun activities at school in a way that the boy understood, telling him about all the interesting things at kindergarten. The next morning, Stan was amazed to find Tim sitting sound asleep on the living room chair because he had woken up very early to wait for his dad to take him to school. Tim said to his father, "Because I don't want to be late for school." The enthusiasm of the parents and older brother sparked in Tim a desire to go to school, while all the advice or threats were in vain. If next time you want to persuade someone to do something, before doing that, ask yourself, what can I do to make that person willingly do this? I often rent a large auditorium in a New York hotel, about 20 evenings per season, to organize lectures. As the opening day approached, the hotel manager suddenly reported that the rent for this season had tripled compared to before. At that time, all the invitations had been sent out. Of course, I didn't want to pay extra, but what would it benefit the hotel if I talked to them about what I wanted? They only cared about what they wanted. 2 days later, I decided to go and see the manager and said, "I was very surprised to receive your letter, but I don't blame you. If I were in your position, I would probably do the same." The responsibility of the hotel manager is to make a profit by any means necessary. If you don't, you'll be fired. I completely sympathize with you. So now, let's try to analyze the pros and cons of what might happen if you raise the rent for the season. Then, I took out a piece of paper, drew a line down the middle, with pros on one side and cons on the other. Under the pros section, I opened parentheses and wrote the line if the auditorium is still empty. Then I continued, you will be conveniently able to rent the ballroom for dances or events. This is a great advantage that brings you more money than renting a conference room. If I occupy the auditorium for 20 nights during the peak season, you will definitely suffer a lot. Besides, there are also some disadvantages. First of all, you won't be able to increase your income from me. On the contrary, you will lose it, because if I have to pay such a high rental fee, I will have to organize the conference elsewhere. There is also another loss for you. Dear Mr. Blank. Warm regards. Our company always strives to maintain its leading position in the advertising industry in the broadcasting sector. Who needs to know what the company wants? I'm still dealing with my own issues. The bank is threatening to foreclose on my house for debt, pests are devouring my vegetable garden, the stock market took a hit yesterday. I just lost 85% of my stock value this morning, didn't get invited to John's dance party last night. The doctor says I have high blood pressure, nerve-wracking, and dandruff. Enough is enough, and then some jerk from New York had to send some fancy letter about what the company wants. It's infuriating. If he understood how annoying this letter is, he'd probably quit advertising and go raise ducks or something. The national announcement and advertising programs are all handled by our company. The swift and timely execution has helped us consistently maintain the leading position in the industry for many years. So your company is big, wealthy, and at the top? So what? Even if your company is as big as General Motors or General Electric or the entire U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff combined, it's all the same. If you had an ounce of intelligence, you'd understand that I care about how important I am, not how important you are. Your grand success just makes me irritated, feeling small and worthless. We aim to provide customers with detailed information about the situation of the broadcasting stations. You want to? Are you a cow? I don't care about what you want or what the US president wants. Let me tell you once and for all that I only care about what I want, yet you haven't said a word about that in your stupid letter. please provide our company with the weekly broadcasting schedule of your station, the more detailed, the more convenient for selecting and arranging advertising programs at the most favorable times. Important information, huh? You're crazy. You brag, boast, and make me feel worthless, and then dare to demand important information from me, without even saying please when making that request. Unbelievable. Upon receiving this letter, please send us the nearest broadcasting schedule of your station, as it will benefit both parties. How ridiculous. You send me a cheap letter, blabbering away, and then have the audacity to demand I send immediately for you, while I'm fuming over my debts and my blood pressure. And who gave you the right to order me around? You say this will benefit both parties, but you haven't shown me how I'll benefit at all. Dear Mr. Doe, as the Director of Communications, the interesting article below is from Blankville Magazine, which I'm sure you'll want to broadcast on your station. Finally, in the postscript, you mention something related to my issue. Why didn't you start the letter with this? But what is it for? You don't make it clear. Are all advertisers as nonsensical as you? You need not my latest broadcasting schedule. What you need is a bit of gray matter to stuff into your pea-sized brain. Dear Mr. Edward Vermeulen. Zerega Sons Company. 28, Front Street. Brooklyn, New York, 11201. Dear Sir. The work at our railway freight terminal for outgoing international shipments has been hindered due to goods arriving too late in the late afternoon. This has resulted in a backlog of goods at the terminal, and in some cases, we have been unable to make deliveries. On November 10th, we received a shipment of 510 items from your company at 4:20 p.m. We sincerely hope to receive your cooperation in addressing this unintended delay. Could you please let us know if you can allocate a portion of your goods for us in the morning instead of scheduling everything in the afternoon to avoid similar instances in the future? The convenience for you in this arrangement is that your goods will be unloaded quickly, and we ensure they will be dispatched promptly thereafter. Sincerely. After reading this letter, Mr. Vermeulen, the sales manager for Zerega Sons Company, sent it to me with the following comments. This letter has had a counterproductive effect. Their initial recounting of their difficulties is something we, in general, don't need to concern ourselves with. It's only towards the end of the letter that they mention if we collaborate, their goods will be swiftly delivered. In other words, what we're most interested in is mentioned last, and the entirety of the letter results in more opposition than cooperation. Now let's see if we can rewrite or improve this letter. Let's not waste time discussing our own issues anymore. As Henry Ford advised, understand and empathize with the viewpoint of others and see things from their perspective as well as your own. Here's the letter rewritten. It may not be the best yet, but it's commendable. Dear Mr. Edward Vermeulen. Zerega Sons Company. 28, Front Street. Brooklyn, NY.11201. Dear Mr. Vermeulen. Your company has been one of our loyal customers for the past 14 years. We greatly appreciate your orders and strive to provide you with the fastest and most efficient delivery service. However, recently we haven't been serving you as promptly as desired due to your trucks delivering large shipments to us very late in the afternoon, specifically on November 10th. The reason is that many other customers also deliver shipments at the same time, causing congestion. As a result, your trucks have to queue up at the port, sometimes delaying even the delivery to you. This will indeed lead to unfavorable outcomes, but it's not insurmountable. If possible, please consider delivering your goods to us early in the morning. This way, your trucks won't have to wait, and your goods can be unloaded immediately. Additionally, our workers can go home earlier in the evening to enjoy your company's excellent pasta. Lastly, no matter when your goods arrive, we will make every effort to serve you promptly. We understand you're busy. Please don't feel obligated to respond to this letter. Sincerely. J.B. Station Manager. Barbara Anderson, a bank employee in New York, wishes to relocate to Phoenix, Arizona, to better care for her son. Utilizing principles learned in our training course, she writes this letter to 12 banks in Phoenix. Dear Sir/Madam. My 10 years of banking experience would be a valuable asset to the rapid growth of your bank. With diverse capabilities in banking operations at Trust Bank New York, I have been promoted to my current position as branch manager. I possess comprehensive knowledge in all areas of banking, including deposit transactions, credit, lending, and management. I will be relocating to Phoenix in May and believe I can contribute to the strength and profitability of your bank. I will be in Phoenix on April 3rd and would greatly appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate how my practical abilities can help achieve results for your bank. Sincerely, Barbara L. Anderson. Guess if Mrs. Anderson received any replies to this letter? 11 banks invited her for interviews, and she received job offers from all 11. The simple reason is that Mrs. Anderson didn't mention what she wanted but focused on what she could offer the banks, addressing their needs instead of her own. Hundreds of thousands of salespeople are walking the streets today, tired and disappointed with low wages. Why? Because they always think about what they want without realizing what the customer wants. We always care only about solving our own problems. And if salespeople can show us how their service or product can solve our problems, they won't need to sell to us. We'll buy it ourselves. Customers want to feel like they're buying, not being sold. Yet many salespeople waste their lives selling their products without understanding the buyer's desires. I've lived in Forest Hills, a community of relatively affluent families in the heart of New York City, for many years. One day, on my way to work, I happened to meet a real estate businessman who had been in this area for a long time. He was very knowledgeable about Forest Hills, so I asked him casually if my stucco house was made with metal lath or hollow block. He said he didn't know and advised me to ask at the Forest Hills architectural meeting. The next day, I received a letter from him. Did he give me the information I wanted? No, he asked me to allow him to advise me on insurance. Clearly, he didn't care about helping me. He only cared about helping himself. In a world full of takers and schemers, those rare individuals who genuinely want to serve others will have a significant advantage. They'll face very little competition. Owen D. Young, a renowned lawyer and one of America's leading business leaders, once said, "Those who can put themselves in the place of others, those who can understand the thoughts and feelings of everyone, never have to worry about the future." If, after reading this book, you only practice one thing, which is always thinking from others' perspectives and seeing things from their point of view, just that alone can create an incredibly important milestone on your career development journey. Understanding issues from others' perspectives and evoking their fervent desires to fulfill what you hope for is not at all exploiting people to seek benefits for yourself and causing harm to their interests. Both parties should have equal benefits. Michael E. Whitten from Warwick, Rhode Island, is a salesperson for Shell Oil Company. Mike wants to become the top salesperson in the area, but one gas station on his service list is a barrier to that desire. The station, managed by a conservative old man, is not receptive to Mike's efforts to change its condition. The station looks so run down that nobody bothers to stop by, but the manager refuses to heed Mike's persuasion to improve the station's image. After urging, conversing, and confiding numerous times with no results, Mike decides to invite the manager to visit the nearest Shell station in the area. The manager is impressed by the strong impression of that Shell station to the point that when Mike visits next time, the gas station has been cleaned up and the revenue has increased significantly. This helped Mike achieve his goal of becoming number one in the area. All the persuasive reasoning didn't bring any results, but by evoking the strong desire in the manager through the image of a current Shell station, professionally, Mike achieved his purpose. Both the manager and Mike benefited. On the contrary, a trainee, before attending my effective presentation training course, wanted to persuade everyone to play basketball in their free time, saying something like this: "I want you all to play basketball. I love playing basketball, but in recent times, we've never had enough players during practice sessions. Just a few days ago, only a few of us played basketball together, and I got hit in the eye. I want all of you to come to the court tomorrow evening. I want to play basketball." Did he say anything about what you want? No. And you're not excited about what he wants either. You also don't want to get hit in the eye. Meanwhile, how much could he say to evoke your enthusiasm for sports practice? There's playing sports for mental relaxation, pleasure, joy, and making more friends. Let me reiterate the wise advice of Professor Overstreet. First, evoke in others a strong desire. Those who can do that will have the world, or else they will be alone. One of my trainees was very frustrated with his little son. The boy was malnourished and reluctant to eat. His parents tried every means but couldn't achieve any results. All day long, they kept arguing with the boy, like, "Mom wants you to eat this and that, Dad wants you to grow up strong and healthy like a knight." The boy wasn't interested in those words, he didn't want to become a knight either. It's absurd to demand a 3-year-old child to think like a 30-year-old father. Finally, the father realized this. He asked himself, what does the boy want? How can I combine what I want with what he wants? Everything suddenly became easier when he started thinking about it. The boy had a 3-wheel bike that he liked to ride on the Brooklyn sidewalk. A few houses away, there was a bigger boy who often took his bike. On such occasions, the little boy would whimper and run to tell his mother. The mother had to intervene, and this situation repeated every day. What does the boy want? You don't need to be a brilliant detective like Sherlock Holmes to figure that out. Hurt pride, the strongest emotions, and urged him to retaliate, to hit the annoying kid in the middle of the nose. The father just needed to say that if he ate what his parents told him, someday, he would be healthy enough and wouldn't be bullied by the bigger boy anymore. So the boy's eating habits didn't have any problems anymore. Another story, there was a boy who often wet the bed at night. He slept with his grandmother. In the morning, the grandmother usually woke him up, felt the bed, and said, "Johnny, look, what did you do last night?" The boy would usually reply, "No, it's not mine. It's yours." Despite scolding, spanking, or constantly reminding that parents didn't want their children to do that, the boy's bed was still wet every night. So the parents wondered, what should we do to make him stop wetting the bed? The girl wants to imitate her mother to feel grown up and mature. So one morning, they brought her to a high chair and let her cook breakfast by herself. At the crucial moment the girl was cooking, the father entered the kitchen. Seeing her father, the little girl exclaimed, "Dad, look at this, I'm cooking noodles by myself." That morning, the little girl willingly ate 2 bowls of noodles without anyone reminding her. She demonstrated her independence by cooking the noodles herself. William Winter once remarked, "Self-expression is a basic human need." We can apply this psychological factor to business. Whenever you have a special idea, you should inspire others with that idea and let them turn it into reality. Then they will see the idea as their own, they will love it, and they will strive to make it happen at all costs. It's easy to receive but difficult to give. It's easy to think poorly of others, but hard to give them trust. It's easy to extinguish others' dreams, but hard to inspire them with a fervent desire. So why not do something difficult but highly effective, like arousing a strong desire in someone? Principle 3. Inspire others with the desire to accomplish what you want them to do. Summary of Part 1. Basic Art of Behavior. Principle 1. Avoid criticism, condemnation, and complaining. Principle 2. Sincerely praise and appreciate others. Principle 3. Inspire others with the desire to accomplish what you want them to do.